The Soviet-Afghan War, a brutal conflict that raged from 1979 to 1989, left an indelible mark on the 20th century. It was a proxy war fueled by the broader tensions of the Cold War. The Soviet Union, a superpower vying for global influence, found itself entangled in a conflict that would have profound consequences. Afghanistan, a nation known for its rugged terrain and independent spirit, became a battleground for competing ideologies. This war was a tragedy on many levels. It led to immense human suffering, devastating Afghanistan's infrastructure, and claiming countless lives. The conflict also had far-reaching geopolitical implications, shaping the course of the Cold War and contributing to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. The war's legacy continues to resonate today, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. It also highlights the complexities of interventionism and the unintended consequences that can arise from military involvement in foreign lands. The Soviet Union's decision to intervene in Afghanistan stemmed from a complex web of political, strategic, and ideological factors. Afghanistan, strategically located at the crossroads of Central Asia and South Asia, had long been an area of interest for the Soviets. The country's proximity to the Soviet Union's southern border made it a buffer zone of significant importance. The Soviet leadership feared that instability in Afghanistan could spill over into Soviet republics, potentially igniting unrest among the Muslim populations within its own borders. Furthermore, the Soviet Union was locked in a global rivalry with the United States. The Cold War was at its peak, and each superpower sought to expand its sphere of influence. Afghanistan, with its potential to destabilize the region, became a pawn in this larger geopolitical chess game. The Soviet leadership saw an opportunity to install a communist government in Kabul, thereby strengthening its position in the region and countering American influence. The decision to intervene, however, would prove to be a grave miscalculation. The Soviet Union found itself bogged down in a protracted and unwinnable conflict. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan ignited fierce resistance from the Afghan people. The Mujahideen, a diverse group of Afghan fighters united by their opposition to the Soviet presence, took up arms against the invaders. These fighters, drawn from various ethnic groups and tribes, were united by their Islamic faith and their determination to defend their homeland. The Mujahideen were skilled guerrilla fighters intimately familiar with the rugged Afghan terrain. They utilized hit-and-run tactics, ambushing Soviet convoys and launching surprise attacks on military outposts. The mountains and deserts of Afghanistan became their allies, providing natural cover and concealing their movements. The Mujahideen's tenacity and their ability to exploit the challenging terrain posed significant challenges for the Soviet military. The Soviets were ill-prepared for the type of guerrilla warfare they encountered. Their heavy weaponry and conventional tactics proved ineffective against an enemy that was both elusive and determined. The Soviet-Afghan War was not solely an internal Afghan conflict. It quickly evolved into a proxy war with external actors, playing significant roles in shaping the course of the conflict. The United States, deeply suspicious of Soviet intentions in the region, saw an opportunity to bleed the Soviet military dry. The U.S. government, under President Jimmy Carter, began providing covert support to the Mujahideen. This support included weapons, funding, and intelligence. Pakistan, sharing a border with Afghanistan and wary of Soviet expansionism, also played a crucial role in funneling aid to the Afghan resistance. China, too, provided arms and training to the Mujahideen, motivated by its own rivalry with the Soviet Union. The influx of foreign support, while crucial in bolstering the Mujahideen's capabilities, also had unintended consequences. It contributed to the fragmentation of the Afghan resistance, with different Mujahideen groups aligning themselves with various external patrons. Section 5. A battlefield of ideologies, the Mujahideen's tactics. The Soviet-Afghan War was not only a clash of military might, but also a battleground of ideologies. The Soviet Union sought to impose its communist ideology on Afghanistan, aiming to create a socialist state aligned with Moscow. The Mujahideen, on the other hand, fought to defend their traditional way of life and their Islamic faith, which they perceived to be under threat from the atheist Soviet regime. The Mujahideen effectively utilized their religious beliefs to mobilize and motivate their fighters. They framed the conflict as a jihad, a holy war against foreign invaders. This narrative resonated deeply within Afghan society, galvanizing support for the resistance and portraying the Soviets as infidels who threatened the very fabric of Afghan culture and religion. Religion played a key role in mobilizing the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen's use of religion as a mobilizing force proved highly effective. It instilled in their ranks a sense of purpose and righteousness, transforming the conflict into a struggle for the survival of their faith and their way of life. This ideological dimension of the war would have lasting consequences, contributing to the rise of Islamic extremism in the region and beyond. The Soviet-Afghan War inflicted deep wounds on Afghanistan, leaving behind a legacy of destruction and displacement. Years of intense fighting ravaged the country's infrastructure, decimating its economy and shattering its social fabric. Cities and towns were reduced to rubble, fields laid barren by mines, and irrigation systems destroyed. The war resulted in a humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of Afghans were displaced, forced to flee their homes in search of safety. Many sought refuge in neighboring Pakistan and Iran, straining the resources of these countries and creating a generation of Afghan refugees. The war's impact on Afghanistan's human capital was equally devastating. The conflict disrupted education, healthcare, and other essential services. A generation of Afghans grew up amidst violence and instability, deprived of opportunities for education and economic advancement. The war left behind a society deeply scarred by trauma, its social and economic fabric torn apart. The Soviet-Afghan War proved to be a costly misadventure for the Soviet Union. What began as a swift military intervention to prop up a friendly regime morphed into a protracted and unwinnable conflict that drained the Soviet treasury, demoralized its military, and eroded its international prestige. The Soviet military, despite its superior firepower, found itself ill-equipped to deal with the challenges of fighting a guerrilla war in the unforgiving Afghan terrain. The Mujahideen's tenacity, their intimate knowledge of the local geography, and their willingness to fight to the death posed formidable challenges for the Soviet forces. The war exacted a heavy toll on the Soviet military. Thousands of Soviet soldiers were killed and wounded in action, and many more returned home physically and psychologically scarred by their experiences. The conflict also exposed weaknesses in the Soviet military machine, undermining its image of invincibility. The Soviet-Afghan War had profound geopolitical implications extending far beyond the borders of Afghanistan. The conflict escalated tensions between the superpowers, contributing to a renewed chill in the Cold War. The United States' support for the Mujahideen, while initially covert, became increasingly overt, further straining relations with the Soviet Union. The war also had a significant impact on the Islamic world. The Mujahideen's struggle against a superpower resonated with many Muslims worldwide, galvanizing support for their cause and fueling the rise of transnational Islamist movements. Some of the fighters who flocked to Afghanistan to join the jihad against the Soviets would later go on to form the core of Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups. The war contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. The conflict drained the Soviet economy, demoralized its people, and exposed the limitations of its military might. The Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1989, while portrayed by Moscow as a negotiated settlement, was widely seen as a humiliating defeat, further weakening the Soviet system and contributing to its eventual demise. The Soviet-Afghan War, often referred to as the Soviet Union's Vietnam, offers valuable lessons for the international community. It serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of interventionism and the unintended consequences that can arise from military involvement in foreign lands. The Soviet Union's misadventure in Afghanistan highlights the dangers of underestimating the resolve of local populations and the challenges of imposing one's will on a culturally and geographically diverse nation. The war also underscores the importance of understanding the local context when intervening in foreign conflict. The Soviet Union's failure to grasp the nuances of Afghan society, its tribal dynamics, and its deep-rooted religious beliefs contributed to its downfall. The war's legacy continues to shape international relations today, serving as a cautionary tale about the limits of military power and the importance of pursuing peaceful solutions to complex global challenges.